worry, vaccines are perfectly safe. According to me, you might notice a little prick. Hello and welcome back to hell. I'm just vaccinating my profiteroles, immunizing them against the horrendous disease known only as not enough cream, itis. Unfortunately, while vaccines are great at stimulating my balls, in humans they've become quite the controversial topic. In the late 90s, an anti-vaccine movement started.
In fact, we'll watch that one first, why not?
The Roman Empire was massive. However, despite its rapid conquests and eventual size, there's one place the Romans notably never conquered. Hibernia, or Ireland as it's now known, and so the...
Okay, let me take a guess. They were already overstretched. To be honest, they didn't really want to hold on to Britannia. So to be honest with you, Ireland was outside of their already outside of their sphere of influence. The tribes in Ireland were not centralized, so it was very difficult to be able to take them out as a whole and suppress them. You'd basically have to build outposts throughout the entirety of Ireland and build cities in that location. Let me guess of anything else. So overstretched, they would have to basically colonize the entire island because the Irish aren't centralized. Yeah, there's my guess.
The question
Let's see how
is,
if I'm right.
Why not? Well, the answer is a bit of an anticlimactic one.
Oh no.
They weren't really that interested. You see, the Romans didn't just conquer territory for the fun of it. It was often done to subjugate neighbouring peoples who were raiding the Roman frontiers, or because there was an area that was rich in resources. Ireland during this period doesn't fit into any of those camps, with the notable exception of those in the north called the Scotii, who were well-known raiders but weren't really enough of a problem for the Romans to actually have to do anything about.
The Scotii.
You see, when Britannia was conquered by the Romans, its primary export was trouble. It required a near-constant large military garrison, and whilst the south was pacified, the north and the west were extremely troublesome. Keeping these areas under control wasn't cheap, and with the much more dangerous Caledonia to the north, travelling west didn't make much sense. That said, there have been Roman artefacts and coins found in Ireland, but determining how they got there is the difficult part. Were they leftovers from an attempted conquest, from trade, or was it the loot from returning Irish mercenaries or raiders? And here's the unsatisfying part. No one knows for sure. Does that mean that the Romans weren't interested in conquering Ireland? No, not at all. Agricola, the man who had subjugated much of Britain, had many times made his plans for the conquest of Ireland clear. He may, emphasis on the may, have travelled to there and defeated the Hibernians. What we know for certain is that Agricola crossed a body of water to do so, but no one knows what body for certain. And even if he did conquer a part of Ireland, it certainly didn't last, and it seems odd that no one at the time made a bigger deal about it. The fact is that Ireland likely wasn't seen by the Romans as worth conquering. Remember that back during the 1st to the 5th centuries, Ireland was densely forested and punctuated with bogs and scary tribes. Even had the Romans conquered Ireland, it was too politically fractured for Rome to govern effectively.
There we go.
Rome, when it conquered a land, would at first put indigenous people in charge of running the province under the guidance of a Roman governor. Ireland wasn't even nearly unified at this point, and it played host to hundreds of small rulers who squabbled over the island's resources. So, was that it? Rome simply ignored Ireland for the most of its existence, barring some trade? Well, maybe. Reading history
Rome
from over a
officially hates
millennium ago isn't
Irish.
simple and prone to easy misreadings. However, throughout the entire life of the Roman Empire, both it and Ireland were in constant contact. This explains how Christianity made its way there in the early 5th century and began to take root, something that would have taken a lot longer had they not. And in conclusion, this is ultimately one of those questions which is quite underwhelming in its answer, because simply put, not enough information is available. What we know from written evidence is that Agricola...
I made this YouTube video asking a really important question. By the way, I don't answer it. We don't know.
had intended to conquer Hibernia, and that it and the Roman world were in constant contact and traded regularly. And from archaeological evidence, we know that Roman artefacts have been found in Ireland, but how they got there is anyone's guess.
How did they get there?
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching, with extra thanks to my patrons that you see on screen now. And a special thanks to James Bizanet, Party Boyko, Azarka Flash,
Party
Chris
Boy.
Wicker...
These better be good links, guys. I'm going to start timing people out to give them bad links. Siege of Orleans. Ugh, that sounds so boring. I'm so sorry.
Hey, it's me, your favorite political extremist, Je Regarde. I did a lot of reading
This
over
guy... I don't want to say, because I have a feeling this guy may have become like an extremist online. Do you know how like sometimes you laugh at someone's guy's videos that they make online, and then later on you find out that they're like almost like, I don't know, like a little bit fashy, you know what I mean? Can you remember that vegan guy? Ginger vegan guy. This guy.
That salad's totally grossing me.
I saw this video on Facebook a long time ago. And I thought it was pretty funny. You know what I mean? I thought it was genuinely pretty funny. Well, anyway, a little bit of a deeper dive. Turns out this guy's like fucking a little bit fashy. Oh, God.
No. Too alcohol.
And like, when I watched this video, I can't laugh. I can't laugh.
Christmas,
This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
All right, we'll watch this one. This better get good.
Hey kids, now some philosophers have called boats the airplanes of the sea, but while every glamorous Glennis has its slow-mo shun, so too does JJ the Jetplane have his awful counterpart. Her legacy in many ways resembles my middle school career, a 3-year-long travesty plagued by blunder after blunder due to both gross incompetence and sheer misfortune, with the only silver lining being that it's remembered by relatively few. Meet the USS William D. Porter, nicknamed the Willie D, which was a perfectly acceptable alias in the days before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. She was a Fletcher-class destroyer, which, if you know Fletcher as well as I do, you know he's pretty high-class at destroying. Like when he snapped off my DS screen during summer camp because he was trying to get a better look. Didn't even apologize. He was just like, well, you're not supposed to bring video games to camp anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do these jokes. These jokes are really bad. It literally reminds me of, like... H/3? Oh, what was the name of this guy?
Anyway, even though everyone did, fuck you, Fletcher. You were a counselor. You're supposed to be more mature than us. You're the reason I got by the Navy and led by Lieutenant Commander Wilfred A. Walter. As her first...
Are all the jokes going to be like high school jokes? Oh, this kid is at school. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I can't watch these kind of videos.
To pick up steam, claiming that they cause autism. And the movement has plenty
There
of
are
washed
quite
up
many
celebrities flushing
misconceptions
it,
about the
including
Second
what's
All right,
World
okay, we're not doing... I'm going to do the videos from now, and you guys, your choices are horrific.
President of the United States,
I'm literally
Donald
having a
Trump,
brain
coming out
aneurysm from you guys'
medicine.
choices.
He once famously twet, no more massive injections. Tiny children are not horses. I mean, of course they aren't. Horses aren't even real. But if there's an entire movement of people with documentaries and websites and Facebook pages with thousands and thousands of members, backed by the former US president, why does everyone else seem to think they're obviously wrong? Has the mainstream medical establishment science cucked a majority of people into thinking they're safe so they can keep making money selling them? The vaccine debate is complex and multi-layered and hasn't been resolved for over 2 decades, so obviously it needs me to come and put an end to it in the space of a single YouTube video, by doing what I'm best at, destroying things with my mouth. Oh, hi, Mum. Was I vaccinated?
Have you been looking into moving out lately, son?
Damn. Destroyed.
Now, the clever clogs among you will know that there was an anti-vaccine movement of sorts in the 1800s when they were first introduced, but that movement died out on its own a long time ago. Of smallpox. The main argument in the modern movement is that they might cause
That is pretty funny, isn't it? There used to be an anti-vax movement in the past, but they died out, literally, of smallpox. Oh my god, you can't make this shit up.
autism. So let's see what, on paper, this
You
claim
can't
is
make this
supported
shit
by.
up.
Yes,
What's
I just
overrun?
ended a sentence with a preposition, and if that annoyed you, we get it. Your school was expensive. We're all very happy for you. Part 1. The easy version, in case you don't feel like watching this whole fucking video.
Yeah, it's not the
In
whole
1998,
fucking
a study
video,
came
come
out alleging a
on!
link between the MMR vaccine and autism. MMR vaccinates against measles, mumps, and rubella, which saves kids from having to get multiple painful shots and parents from having to know what rubella is. It was published in The Lancet, a very well-known
I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea what rubella is. I've never fucking heard of it.
medical journal, which made it seem credible. However, the paper was eventually found guilty of being bad. The science turned out to be bonkers, and multiple other studies on literally millions of children did not show that there was a link, and the paper was eventually retracted by the journal that published it. So retracted that it literally has retracted written all across every page in big red letters. My printer just does black and white, so I've actually got an artist's impression of the real.
Pro tip for you guys, if you want to save on expensive ink cartridges, always print in black and white, and always select draft over the other option.
Version.
Because draft means it only like prints like once every 2 lines, I think, so it only prints half as much ink per paper. Yeah, draft, and I can't remember what's the default setting. I don't know.
So far, that's some pretty shaky ground on
I,
the
by the way, hate
anti-vaccine
printers.
side. But later,
I
new
really hate
evidence
printers.
came out that...
Printers are trash.
Oh, that's it. That's all the evidence. This segment is over now. Part 2, the existential horror of... Wait, that's it? No, seriously. That's all the evidence. There is nothing else even remotely credible. There are some fringe pet theories as to what chemical in the vaccines causes the autism, but since vaccines don't cause autism, they're kind of putting the cart before the squid here. The anti-vax movement had next to no evidence 20 years ago, and now they have even less. But hold on there, Daddy-O. Sure, you can sum up the entire issue in 52 seconds, wow. But really, I don't think that's good enough. Everyone who's anti-vax at this point has probably already heard and isn't
you defeat
convinced
Italy
by
as
the
Ethiopia,
easy
'cause
version. I
I'm
mean, if you're on the
good,
fence
bro.
about vaccines, you're not going to change your mind
good,
because
bro.
someone told you there was a paper once, but it got retracted, no matter how much they pitch shift their voice in post. But what if you did want to change someone's mind on topics like this?
Ideological
The data on this issue
fanaticism.
is discouraging. Research shows
I love
that
the
when
name of
someone
that.
becomes personally invested in an idea, they can become very close-minded. Or worse, a YouTuber. Political science professor Brendan Nyhan and his team spent 3 years studying how over 1,700 parents reacted to various different attempts to convince them to vaccinate their children, and found that no matter what they tried,
I hate to
parents who
become a
started out
YouTuber.
against vaccination didn't change their minds, and worse, trying
No,
to
I
correct
hate
false claims
YouTubers.
about
They're so
vaccines
narrow-minded
actually made some
and dumb.
parents more against vaccinating.
And
Nyhan
emotional.
told The New Yorker, "It's depressing. We were definitely depressed." Now, as a fellow fan of logic and reason, I'm also doing great. But in today's particular...
Cheap printers are trash. They can be. They can be. It depends how often you use them. If you're one of those people that use your printer like every week or every other day, I feel like an expensive one's probably right around. It's one of those kind of like
shall
how
we
much you
say,
use it scenario.
socioeconomic climate, it's extra pressing that we figure out how to get everyone on the same page with regards to public health. So the purpose of this video isn't just to point out a group that's wrong about something. The real question is,
Attack me.
when
Attack
someone
me.
is
Attack
wrong
me.
about something, not just
Attack me.
this, how do you change their mind? Now, personally, I'm not sure how to do that. If it was easy for humans
lose
to
you.
change their mind about stuff, then this video
didn't
wouldn't
work.
need to exist, would it? But maybe we'll find some answers by exploring what convinced people vaccines might be dangerous in the first place. We should probably begin with that old 1998 study, because let's be honest, how many people on either side of this discussion have actually read it? People don't read scientific papers. They check out the blogs or videos of people who they already agree with, and they tell them what the science said. And I mean, same. I heard all the other people say the science was bad,
Run away,
and
Mussolini.
I believed them. And the anti-vax
Run
people
away.
probably just believed whoever told them it was true. So
Bullshit, we
to
need
be
more divisions.
unbiased about this, let's
Come on.
really start at the beginning. Look at the original paper. That's the wrong page. Let's actually read this old paper and see what it has to say and come to an honest conclusion about its findings.
Honest? On the internet? Come on.
What the fuck? This is why people are against vaccines? This is the worst fucking paper I've ever read in my life! Right, let's talk about the study. I'm calling it The Study because its real title was Ileal Lymphoid Nodular Hyperplasia, Nonspecific Colitis, and Pervasive Developmental Disorder in Children, which is a bit of a tongue.
Okay, I'm going to be totally real with you guys. Okay, this is something an old boomer, Feedback Gaming, learned as an older man. I feel like you guys can learn too. Don't call anti-vaxxers and conspiratorial people stupid or dumb, okay? We, from now on, when they come up with a bad argument, we're going to refute their bad argument, okay? We're not going to call them dumb or stupid, okay? We need to counteract their ideas with our better ideas, okay? Because we're big brain, all right?
Twister. I
Big
had to do a
brain.
not insignificant amount of Googling to find out whether it's pronounced ileal or ileal. Don't know why I bothered. If I got it wrong, it's not like you would have noticed. The paper's lead author is Dr. Andrew Wakefield. I'm sorry,
brain.
there's a mistake in my script. The paper's lead author is disgraced ex-doctor Andrew Wakefield. Wakefield is seen by many as the founder of the modern anti-vaccine movement, since he was behind the paper that started the whole thing. Let's keep an eye on that guy. Oh, fucking. The smoke machine occasionally goes off on its own for no reason. I can't be bothered to get up. The paper's supposed purpose was to investigate a connection between bowel disorders and developmental issues in children, in particular targeting signs of autism. So first off, what's a colitis? Right, hold on. Okay, colitis is inflammation of the colon, one of the main symptoms of bowel diseases like Crohn's disease, for example.
Colitis.
By the way, we're going to use words like bowel, colon, and intestine interchangeably in this video. Don't let it confuse you, they're mostly the same thing. If you're a doctor, pretend you didn't hear that. The paper says non-specific colitis because it's not looking for specific kinds of inflammation. It's looking at whatever inflammation these children happen to have and seeing how they compare, because maybe they're all linked, and maybe they're even linked to the autism. According to Wakefield, he just happened to notice a lot of kids with
finding
both
deserts
autism
is really
and
easy because
bowel
there's no
disorders.
penalties.
And
Oh, it's not deserts,
launched
it's
the study
plains.
to investigate a possible link.
Okay, the deserts are here.
But what does all that have to do with vaccines?
Just
I mean,
dodge them.
surely it must have found something for it to have caused all this controversy. Well, allow me to list the paper's highly scientific findings. Some of the parents of the children...
Okay, just for a second, I'm patting myself on the back here, but this is really good micro. So you basically position one division on each of the areas you want to defend, and you tell them to not follow any orders, exclamation mark. Can you see that? And then when you're attacking, the AI will cause them to move all the divisions to the areas you are attacking, and then you can move forward. Big brain.
in the study think they remember the autism symptoms starting after the MMR vaccine. No, really, that's it.
Findings. Onset of behavioral symptoms was associated by the parents with measles, mumps, and rubella.
So the AI
vaccine.
right now has detected
For
it's
literally
encircled, that's why
decades,
it's
right,
emergency
I've
pushing.
been hearing about this paper, and I've assumed that there must have been something there, like something to at least explore or discuss or debunk. Everyone lost their fucking minds over it, so surely there's something, and I finally go and read it, and it's just a bunch of fucking parents' opinions. It's just nothing there.
Opinions on the internet?
I can't fucking believe this. Like, seriously, the disconnect between the attempts at real science and the stuff the parents think they remember is, like, so jarring. Like, next to colonoscopies and biopsies and graphs of urinary excretions, you'll suddenly get sentences like...
He received a dose of measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the day after which his mother described a striking deterioration in his behavior that she did link with the immunization.
A note from your mother isn't science, it's how you get out of PE. I'm sorry, coach, I didn't really have polio. Maybe some home decorating will relax me. I love this poster because I'm smart, and now all my guests will know I'm smart.
Finally invented radio, guys.
I'm a party
The
animal. I
Ethiopians
have
are
a
developing.
charisma of at least 6.
I'm actually really enjoying this, by the way. It's actually really relaxing. Oh, they've got no supply to get that done.
I wonder why The Economist interviewed ContraPoints and not me. There. Perfect. Does that look alright to you? No, Rachel, don't wave the camera. That's not how people communicate. Page 3 of the study provides a table listing each child's behavioral diagnosis, largely autism, and also what their parents identified as their exposure, the thing which, in their opinion, caused the diagnosis. Of course, most of them blame the vaccine. Now, while a bunch of opinions are about as useful in science as a bath made of teeth, we might as well explore how someone might end up having that opinion. It's actually really common for us to... Actually, hey, Angie?
Yeah?
Could you draw me as a ferret, please?
Okay. Why?
I will not explain why. It's actually really common for us to assume two things that happen to us around the same time must be caused by one another. That's how we, as ape people whose fur fell off one day, think about things with our tiny, godless little monkey brains. If you ate some strange new berries and got sick that day, you're basically programmed to connect the two for the sake of your own survival. This is the 1 in 10 times that evolutionary psychology is real. The rest are fake, Malcolm, but these correlations we make in our heads between events aren't necessarily true. It might not have been the berries. It could have been all the budget energy drinks you import from Thailand. You know what? Maybe you can have too much Carabao. Another big problem here is how...
I really want this energy drink. The minute I heard this existed, I wanted to try it out because it was in the video. That's how sponsorships work with YouTubers, okay? That's the reason why I really want things. Oh, God. I'm at war with Germany now? This never happened in my last game. What the fuck? Guess we're defeating the Germans, boys. The Germans.
Humans relate to spans of time. Just like how under quarantine you might not even notice 4 months passing because nothing happens anymore. If someone coughs on you today and later in the evening you start to feel a bit sick, a lot of people might remember being coughed on and assume that's how they got it. But illnesses can take days or weeks to incubate. Maybe you don't remember the time you got coughed on 2 weeks ago by the guy who was delivering the last crate of energy drinks. Oh, Carabao, why is it so hard to quit you? Win football tickets? I can't wait to be in a crowd of people again. The table claims some of the parents notice the symptoms a few weeks, days, or even hours after getting the vaccine. But I do have to wonder how easy it is for someone to recall something as complex as the exact date of the onset of a child's behavioral symptoms. A BBC documentary from back in the day interviewed a parent and they said on camera that their son became autistic overnight after the vaccine.
What happened to your other son? Overnight. He had the fever, the high temp, literally overnight. He was never the same again.
Even the interviewer was like, literally? Literally overnight? Like, are you sure? The sign.
Yeah, so what is the incubation period of common cold? (24 to 72 hours). Common colds they activate really quickly.
Signs of autism appear gradually and grow
like COVID,
over
for
time.
instance,
When parents first take notice, there could easily be other signs they missed. Another better documentary about all this we'll get to later actually found parents who realized they'd made this exact mistake.
Stacey and Damien no longer believe that their daughter's autism was caused by MMR. After researching and remembering Rebecca as a baby, they realized that she had already shown symptoms before she was vaccinated.
Parents don't necessarily notice the symptoms until they're fairly obvious, but that doesn't mean the symptoms weren't there or their child wasn't autistic beforehand. I'm bringing this up because it's important to make the distinction that whenever someone describes something like their child's first symptom, what they are really describing is the first symptom they personally noticed. Here's a timeline of the first 2 years of a child's development. Statistically, the average age that symptoms of autism become noticeable to parents is around 12 to 18 months. Children in the UK receive a dose of the MMR vaccine from between 12 to 15
divisions
months.
encircling
Isn't
in Libya.
It possible that these parents are blaming a coincidental event? You can even see evidence that this happens in the paper, because some of the other parents blame other totally coincidental events. One of them blames their child's autism on an ear infection they got a week before they first noticed the symptoms. Do ear infections cause autism now? No. No. Of course not. But if it was the only other thing that you remembered happening to your child, you can see how someone might end up assuming they're related. Before this study was released, there were a few very small clusters of parents that thought vaccines caused autism or other illnesses. JABS, the Justice, Awareness and Basic Support Group, wow, they really worked hard to make their namesake JABS, had been around for a few years beforehand. The founder of JABS, Jackie Fletcher, asserts to this day that her son suddenly became severely autistic 10 days after his MMR vaccination, and has frequently tried to sue the government and MMR manufacturers for money over it. It's important to recognize that statistically, even if vaccines are perfectly safe, you're going to get a small amount of parents like her who are convinced that vaccines are harmful because they got one right before something like this happened. Before there was a scientific paper and thousands of news pieces telling them to, there really weren't that many parents of autistic children who blamed the vaccine. According to a pro-jabs piece made in May 2002, when the scare was happening, there were thousands of members, but before all that, there were only about 30 sets of parents at best. And speaking of groups being too small to be statistically meaningful, another big problem, or to put it another way, a small problem, is sample size. Please hold your applause until the end. On its own, a study of a small sample size, like 12 children, can't prove anything about the rest of a population. I've made this point about people drawing sweeping conclusions from small studies before. However, it's important to understand sample size criticisms in the proper context. Studies on small groups happen all the time in science, for a good reason. They're often called pilot studies, and they're useful for figuring out how a bigger study should work in preparation for the real thing, or for checking to see if there's something worth looking into in the first place. A fraction of parents of the tens of millions of children who've had this vaccine saying they think there might be a connection is, at best, grounds to do a
Do you know what's sad about this part, guys? There's not really much you can do. You're constantly at the whim of the allies trying to push unable to because you're lacking breathing space. It's this at this point. It's kind of boring. You don't really have enough industry to kind of build up from here as well, which is really sad. Yeah. My contribution, though, is 66%. I kid you not. 66%. Does that mean I can take a big chunk out of Germany if they capitulate? Conquer Africa. I mean, I don't know how, because... Yeah, to be honest, you're right, actually. The only point is to F Italy, and that's it, and you're done. You're done. Technically, this gameplay is now over. It becomes a Drew Durnall mode at this point, because there's not much you can do. I don't know why I've got trade and supply. Trade and supply 2 of 7. Who am I trading with? I have rubber. I don't think you can't declare. You're in the Allies. I'm going to be totally honest with you, my dude. The comment you just posted there, ICE, YSSB, is so dumb. I don't even think I'm actually hovering over the timeout button right now. What you just said is so dumb. You might want to stop talking. I love you. Because you've got no resources, you just can't do anything. I suppose what you could do is that if there's any land occupied by the Allies, you could just beg the UK for control of it. But there's no the resources you need, the core building blocks of any game playing Hoi 4 is steel. It'd be kind of cool if this game had the option to like ask for aid from larger countries. Like you could ask the UK or France or the US for aid, and it gives you civvies for free or something. I don't know, just something to kind of make you want to play the game when you're a minor power. But at this point, the game's over, you know? The game is over. It's a bit of a shame, too, that I didn't manage to press this button. Because last time I did this, Italy didn't join an alliance. Let me see if I can make them... How do you make these? I think you can because it's grayed out. Never mind. This is so dumb. This is not going to work. Italy doesn't even exist now. So the decisions disappeared. Never mind. Ugh, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? There's a command that makes everything possible. Is it annex all?
Better study on a
Alright, we're done now. We're done with this
group of children to find out if this connection
the strategy
actually
works.
exists.
It's just that
we're going to come back to this
how you
later
expand
because
from it
someone
is a
had the
bit
opportunity to do one of those, and what they did with that
lame.
opportunity is very interesting.
Okay, this video is practically over now anyway. The first, like, 20 minutes is the sweet spot. And at this point, he starts to like, oh, do you want to watch the Flat Earth one? The Flat Earth one's really good. I need a pee, guys, really badly. Be right back, I need a pee. Test, test, test. Test, 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 test. My mute button's not working. What the fuck? Hi, how's it going? Oh, this one's a good video. How to spot a potential fascist.
Oh, hey everyone. You just found me here in the great outdoors, doing a bit of bird spotting. See, I'm a bit of an amateur conservationist, me, at the weekends, you know. There's a particular species I've got my eye out for today. Fascisticus potentialicus. You might be more familiar with their cousin of sorts, Fascisticus actualicus. Horrible creatures, those murderous things. They wreak havoc on any ecosystem they're able to establish a presence within. Relatively rare, though, thankfully, and easy to spot, too. You can usually tell Fascisticus actualicus by its call. It sounds a bit like a dog whistle. Thing about Fascisticus actualicus, though, far too rare to have any meaningful impact on its own. In fact, in all known instances where Fascisticus actualicus has been able to see through on its horrible designs, they've always been supported by the local flock of Fascisticus potentialicus. Oh, the latter might seem far less keen initially. They're not all that likely to open their beaks in support of the thing
Feedback gaming ASMR, I love it.
But as soon as Fascisticus
is there something I'm missing here? Might want to explain yourself, guys.
A meaningful presence in a locality.
Explain yourself.
Well, you'll soon find Fascisticus potentialicus puffing up its chest and flying in whatever formation it is that Fascisticus actualicus decrees.
Oh, thanks for the raid, Richard. I appreciate that, dude.
The problem for conservationists such as myself, though, is they're just so damn hard to spot.
Appreciate that, bro. Love you, bro.
Recognising these floundering fowl is essential if we're ever going to encourage them to beat their wings in a different direction.
Love you. I love you, bro. No, I really mean it. I love you.
In 1945,
the
Second World War came to a close with the victory of the Allied forces over Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan. If they hadn't been already, the crimes of the former regime in Germany were now plain for all to see. 6 million Jews, along with Poles, LGBT people, and so-called political dissidents, had been systematically murdered. These genocidal plans had been drawn up by the state. Nevertheless, their enactment had required the complicity and active participation
Why are all the
of a
divisions got
huge
support companies? That's really annoying.
Germans and those living in the countries they came to occupy. With the war over, there was thus a growing interest in what had caused so many supposedly ordinary people to lend this heinous regime their support. Among those interested in finding answers to this question were 4 psychologists based at the University of California, Berkeley. Theodore W. Adorno, Elsa Frankel-Brunswick, Daniel J. Levinson, and R. Nevitz Sandford. 2 of their number, Adorno and Frankel-Brunswick, were unavoidably existentially invested in this topic, both being European Jews who had fled to America to escape persecution.
Promises of peace.
All, however, were interested in understanding how fascism had gone over
piece
the
of
German
Poland,
people
piece of
in order that
France,
such a
piece of
scenario might be
Yugoslavia.
avoided in the future. Crucially, these 4 academics, whose research led to the publication of a book called The Authoritarian Personality, weren't overly interested in out-and-out fascists, those with a pre-existing commitment to the cause. Instead, they were interested in understanding what they called the potentially fascistic individual. The kind of person who might distance themselves from fascist beliefs in any normal time, but who, should fascism take hold in the country in which they live and appear to have some level of
ever since I cleaned my teeth, like,
might be
so the
persuaded
dentist
to participate in
one
its
of my teeth
murderous
is really
design.
sensitive now.
Eventually, as the title of their book
painful,
suggests,
actually.
they began to consider whether there might be a set of personality traits which make some people more susceptible to fascist propaganda.
Oh my god, are we going to Q&A, guys?
It's
Can we
worth
find out
saying
if you guys
that
are
Adorno
fascists?
et al. Weren't seeking to propose a purely psychological explanation for the Nazis' rise to power. They repeatedly stressed throughout their book that the emergence of fascism in mid-20th century Europe was the result of numerous economic, political, and social forces and circumstances. Furthermore, though the Nazis did win a huge share of the popular vote in Germany in 1932, for many, both in Germany and Europe more broadly, fascism was something that was forced upon them, rather than something which they brought about themselves. What the researchers behind the authoritarian personality were interested in exploring was instead what people's responses to a fascist regime might be should it come to power, and what it is that separates those likely to resist such a movement from those who might end up participating in it. It's important to begin by recognising that fascism as an ideology is notoriously difficult to define. The novelist...
Fuck. Sorry, I know he's already said it now, but I was just about to say that. Like, people, when it comes to fascism, the reason why it gets kind of used as an insult so frequently is it's the definition of it is so unbelievably broad, it's so difficult to define. It's not impossible to define, but it's basically a bunch of bullet points, so it's like hard to actually assess and define. I'm just repeating myself.
And critic Umberto Eco, who grew up in fascist Italy, notes that the various forms of fascism which existed in Europe in the mid-20th century varied wildly in their ideological content, and predicts that, should it re-emerge, its mottos and insignia would be different once again. He describes fascism as...
why did I do promises of peace? I'm going to have to do a civil war anyway, aren't I? Yeah, I am. That was stupid. Whoops. Mistakes were made.
Fuzzy totalitarianism, a collage of different philosophical and political ideas, a beehive of contradictions. As Eco goes on to articulate, however, there are a handful of key traits that have been consistent across movements which have described themselves as fascist. These include nationalism, a cult of tradition, and a view of social relations that holds that life is permanent warfare between the powerful and the powerless, with the establishment of an equitable society being a complete impossibility. Although, as we'll see, many of these aspects of fascism did eventually come to be of interest to the researchers behind the authoritarian personality, they were primarily focused on another consistent aspect of fascism, and its most pernicious, the popularization of racism, prejudice, and bigotry. For, as Eco writes, fascism grows up and seeks for consensus by exploiting and exacerbating the natural fear of difference. Fascism, to Eco, is racist by definition. Adorno et al.'s primary focus, then, was what it is that causes some people to be won over by this racist rhetoric, where others might be more resistant to it. Rather than engage in mere philosophical speculation, Adorno, Frankel-Brunswick, Levinson and Sanford decided to launch an empirical study into why people might be drawn to fascism. This study utilised two main methods. The first was the distribution of 2,099 anonymous questionnaires to primarily white, non-Jewish women and men living in the San Francisco Bay Area, with smaller groups being recruited in Los Angeles, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. These questionnaires featured two main types of question. The first were factual questions, which, in the researchers' own words, had to do mainly with past and present group memberships, church preference and attendance, political party, vocation, income, and so on. The second set of questions were opinion attitude scales, or Likert scales, in which the participants were asked to what extent they agreed or disagreed with a series of statements. These questionnaires were later followed by a series of interviews in which the researchers were able to get a better sense of why participants had agreed or disagreed with certain statements. Led by the particular focus of the racism of the Nazi regime, the researchers' initial focus was on anti-Semitism. Amongst the statements the participants were invited to signal their level of agreement or disagreement with then were a series of anti-Semitic propositions. The more tame of these included, "I can hardly imagine myself marrying a Jew," and "Most hotels should deny admittance to Jews as a general rule." Based upon our participants' responses, the researchers then placed them along what they called an anti-Semitism scale, ranging from not anti-Semitic at all to very anti-Semitic. This on its own obviously doesn't tell us anything more than that some people are anti-Semitic while others aren't. Alongside these statements then, the researchers included a further set, which aimed to measure the participants' broader level of what they called ethnocentrism. As they explain it, ethnocentrism refers to group relations generally. It has to do not only with numerous groups towards which the individual has hostile opinions and attitudes, but equally important, with groups towards which he is positively disposed. Where the previous set of statements had focused entirely on the participants thinking about Jewish people, this element of the questionnaire thus broadened the focus, inviting participants to agree or disagree with a series of statements about black people and other quote-unquote minority groups. They also included some statements which sought to gauge how loyal
I've never heard that
otherwise
one. I've heard the idea of a constant struggle between the powerful and the weak.
The main threat to basic American institutions during this century has come from the infiltration of foreign ideas, doctrines, and agitators. As with the anti-Semitism aspect of the questionnaire, based upon each participant's responses, the researchers then placed them along a scale, this time referred to as the ethnocentrism scale. What they found was that participants who scored highly on the anti-Semitism scale were likely to also score highly on the ethnocentrism scale. And this might initially seem unremarkable. We might expect that someone who
imagine rulers cheese civil wars
is also likely to be racist towards others.
That'd be very weird.
The consequences of proving this empirically, however, are significant. As one of the researchers, Levinson, wrote, "This seems to strongly suggest that we are faced here not with a particular set of political convictions and a particular set of opinions about a specific ethnic group, but with a way of thinking about groups and group relations generally. That anti-Semitism in particular goes hand in hand with a broader ethnocentrism, suggests that people are not won over by fascist bigotry due to them being simply convinced through facts and logic that the particular group they are being encouraged to support persecution of are inferior. Instead, it suggests that one's susceptibility to fascist propaganda might be the result of something more deeply rooted in the way that they view the world, or, in short, their personality."
I need more manpower.
The notion that someone's susceptibility to fascist and racist propaganda might be connected to something deeper about their personality was further supported by the next stage in Adorno et al.'s research, in which they sought to find out whether there might be a correlation or connection between the participants' position on the ethnocentrism scale and their opinions on politics and religion. The researchers invited the study's participants to agree or disagree with a further series of statements which sought to ascertain, in a very rough way, where the participants sat on a left-right political economic spectrum. Statements in this portion of the questionnaire included, in general, full economic security is harmful. Most men wouldn't...
Hey, in my finishing video, I did not take Indonesia, okay? For the record, I did not take Indonesia in my Finland video.
They didn't need the money for eating and living. And it is a fundamental American tradition that the individual must remain free of government interference, free to make money and spend it as he likes. Analysing the responses, the researchers then placed the participants on what they referred to as a politico-economic conservatism scale. To my mind, this is where the results begin to get truly interesting. For while the researchers did find that those with progressive or liberal economic views were more likely to have disagreed with ethnocentric statements, amongst conservatives, things were more complex. As Levinson wrote, strong political liberalism is a pretty good indicator of anti-ethnocentrism, but political conservatism is less.
Watch videos like this often in my spare time, yes.
In short, as we would hope, it was entirely possible for the participants to hold conservative political and...
I tend to watch a lot of my videos that I disagree with more, because I don't like to think that my ideas are permanent and in solid states. I like to watch things I don't understand or I disagree with.
Economic positions without necessarily...
These are kind of more normie videos, to be honest with you. This is not what I normally would listen to. The myth of the free press.
Necessarily being ethnocentric or racist. Where there was a distinction was in why someone held those conservative
one
views.
mistake I've made
Take
in
the
this game
statement,
so far
America may not be perfect, but the American
is I
way
should have
has
gone
brought
down
us about as
militarism
close as
early
human
on.
beings can get to a perfect
because
society.
I need that extra 7%
There are at least
recruitable.
2 reasons why someone might agree with this statement. One person might do so because after careful
It can get
consideration of
frustrated.
numerous
It can.
economic,
You just got to take a
political, and social
pause, a minute,
systems
take a
which
breath, and think
existed
about what they're
throughout
saying and
history,
think why
they've
it's
decided
bad.
that they believe that the
Or good.
contemporary American one is the best so far achieved. Another, however, being an American resident, might support that statement out of blind loyalty to their nation. What the researchers found in their later interviews was that those who had scored highly on the ethnocentrism scale were far more likely to have arrived at their conservative beliefs through the second way of thinking than the first. Even more than the correlation between anti-Semitism and ethnocentrism, that the deciding factor here is not the political and economic views that one holds, but the manner in which one has arrived at those views, begins to suggest that a person's susceptibility to fascist propaganda might be informed by their personality. This was further corroborated through comparing participants' placement on the ethnocentrism scale with their religious beliefs, in which the fact that a person was or wasn't religious turned out to be far less important than how and why they had become so. Those who had scored low on the ethnocentrism scale, for instance, were far more likely to have chosen the church they attended of their own accord, whilst those who scored highly on the ethnocentrism scale, if they were religious, were
Let's
more
just
likely
pretend you didn't see this. Just pretend that I did it. I did it. Wink, wink, wink. I did it. I did it. Wink, wink. You didn't see that. Wink, wink. It didn't happen.
to have simply joined the same church as their parents. It's worth highlighting that this doesn't suggest
Thank you for the
that
bits.
everyone who goes to
Wow,
church
one
and
bit.
goes to the
That's
same
$1
church as
million
their
you
parents
just sent
is
to me.
a
Holy
potential
shit, I'm
fascist.
rich.
What it does allow us to do, however, is to begin to get inside the minds of those who have already expressed agreement with fascistic and racist sentiments. We are perhaps already beginning to see a set of shared personality
I also
traits
shouldn't have created a
emerge
horse either.
in
I
relation
should
to
have
both
created
politics
a
and
one
religion.
battalion of
We see that
infantry.
those who would agree
Because
with
this uses too many
fascistic
guns.
statements
Oh, thank you
being
for the
somewhat
subscription,
conformist
Ocean
and
Mango.
less
I appreciate that.
critical in
Thank
their
you.
approach to the world. Drawing upon these observations, and others, Adorno, Frankel-Brunswick, Levinson and Sanford thus set about painting a more complete picture of what the personality of the typical, potentially fascistic individual might look like. The researchers' method for uncovering what personality traits might be more prevalent among those who had agreed with ethnocentric
Tommy's stream go?
statements was similar to those that they had engaged in the previous aspects of the study. They added a further set of statements to their questionnaires, which participants were invited to agree or disagree to different levels with. A participant's responses to those questions could then be compared with their placement on the ethnocentrism scale in order to find out if there were any personality traits which were particularly prevalent among those who had agreed with fascistic statements. The researchers referred to this portion of the questionnaire as the F scale, with the F standing for fascist. Given that the researchers were now attempting to move beyond the study of what they called surface ideological trends, and look instead at personality traits, the statements included in this portion of the questionnaire were now far, far removed from the consideration of explicit...
What was the name of that Italian guy? Italian... fascist... book? Two boots. Fascism, bullet point. Yeah, this video is taking... here we go. This Umberto Eco. This guy wrote a book. He lived under fascist Italy. Which actually doesn't make a lot of sense, actually, because he's not old enough, is he? I don't know. It depends how old this picture is. And he goes through basically the bullet points of what he describes what fascism could be. And I'll be honest with you, when you read this list, it's actually kind of really difficult to make out what it actually is. The cult of tradition only has to look at the Sibyllus of every fascist movement to find the major tradition of thinkers. So it's an obsession with the past, basically. Talking about like the Nazis, for instance, like to talk quite a lot about Norse warriors and things like that, and the origins of the state, and obsessing about Prussia. Oh shit, man! It's like the whole EU4 community. Lots of emphasis on the past and tradition and how things were meant to be, and everything today is corrupt, and in the past was very iconic and romanticized. The rejection of modernism, that's the same kind of thing again. Every pillar of institution that exists today is corrupt, bad. It's been infected with badness, but the past is glorified and romanticized. The cult of action for action's sake, action being beautiful in itself, must be taken before or without any previous reflection, taken in the form of emasculation. Emasculation? Oh, right, okay. I suppose this reflects on like traditional roles of men, isn't it? The idea of men are about strength and are about winning, are about victory, and like putting lots of emphasis on that. Once again, this all comes back to history and traditionalism and focusing heavily on the past, like map gamers. Why do you do this to me, chat? Why do you do this? Okay. The fear of difference. This is kind of what extreme nationalism does. It's the idea that anything that is different and unusual and different, that isn't what it's comfortable with, is seen intrinsically as bad. So any kind of institution that could potentially benefit your nation, you reject it instantly because it is automatically bad because it is different. The appeal to social frustration. One of the most typical features of a historical fascism was the appeal to the frustration of the middle class. A class suffered from economic crisis, a feeling of political humiliation, and frightened by the pressure of a lower social groups. I don't know how to put this into words, like a simplified version. The obsession with a plot. Thus, a root of fascism psychology is obsession with the plot, possibly the international one. The followers must feel besieged. I don't know how to I don't know how to simplify that either. The enemy is both strong and weak. Oh shit! You see this online quite a lot, actually. Antifa. They're simultaneously Antifa super soldiers that are violent and will destroy your family and your civilization, but they're also little girls and little boys in their bedrooms that haven't moved out of their parents and don't have a job. They're simultaneously, they're weak and can destroy you, and they're also they're obviously really strong and they can destroy you, and they're also simultaneously really weak and pathetic. This idea of that the enemy is a mixture of both. And I feel like the Germans did this with the Slavs, didn't they? They represented them as powerful, a threat, but also simultaneously ethnically weak. This idea that the enemy is strong and weak simultaneously, which doesn't even make a lot of sense if you think about it. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. Your fascism is a struggle of the life of the rebel armies that live by struggle. Oh, the idea of non-action, the idea of being reserving an isolated, simple life and having peace is frowned upon because obviously it's all about might. It is right, and the idea of strength is the number one virtue. But let's be totally real with you. In today's world, the idea of strength, the actual size of your muscles in your arm, don't really make a good reflection on how you win struggles in your own day-to-day life. Big biceps isn't going to get you a job interview. Big biceps isn't going to help you with a guy with a machine gun or a machete, is it? The idea that this obsession with like physical strength is an obsession of dwelling to the past again, isn't it? Contempt for the weak. Elitism is typically aspect of the... Yeah, once again, focusing that anything that is weak is frowned upon. Everything is educated to become a hero. Oh, there's the cult of heroism, isn't it? Trying to think of a simplified version of that. Oh yeah, I think it's the idea of like people who is a nobody can become a hero, because it's like there's obsessions about certain heroes of World War II that were nobodies, and because they earned their worth on the battlefield, they could become something. So it's the idea that you are a loser, you're going nowhere. Well, welcome to our club. In our club, you can become a hero, because anyone can become a hero. Machoism and weaponry. Give me more civvies. More civvies. Partial mow me, boys. Bob me. Bob me up. Am I pronouncing that? Machoism is implied both disdain for women and intolerance in condemnation of non-sexual habits. Oh, it's just a rejection of basically anything that is out of the ordinary. Anything that isn't like a judo. It's like, what's the orthodox Christian beliefs is like frowned upon, and the idea of like hypermasculinity. Can I hear a cat? Can I hear a cat? Selective populism. There are a future of a TV and internet populism with an emotional response to selected groups of citizens that present and accept as the voice of the people. I don't know what it means by selective. All Nazis and fascists made use of impoverished vocabulary in order to limit the instruments of conflict. Oh, it's the idea that the communists in the Soviet Union did this, didn't they? Thank you for the subscription, Crows S0001. I appreciate the prime, bro. The prime. Yeah, whenever the communists took over and the Nazis took over in the Soviet Union and Germany, retrospectively, they implemented their own version of science that kind of meets their political ideology. This kind of rejection of science. God, this is really complex, actually. This is not really a nice, easy way of like describing fascism to someone. It's hard to define as a definition of fascism. That's not what one of the definitions of fascism, but I get what you're trying to say.
Political idea.
This video is boring me now. The fall of Doctor Who. Rating countries by Slavness, traveling with Boris. What? My recommendation. Okay. The nationalists have won the Spanish Civil War. For a change. For a change. Yeah, I made quite a few mistakes with this. To be honest with you, I shouldn't have done promises of peace twice. So now I could go for service. Oh, I can't do service by requirement because I need 3% more war support. Never mind. So the parallels are both right and left here in the US. The bullet points. Well, I think the truth is when it comes down to power, the truth is you can find any people that can be defined as fascist. You have to look at the people who have the power. You know, a lot of the time I see this reference quite often, like the idea of communism is like really close in America. This kind of idea of fear that the communists are taking over. But then you struggle to name anyone who is in power in America that is like described as a communist or has communist ideals. But then this is gonna make some of you guys really angry and upset. But then you draw the parallels to Donald Trump and some of the things he'd say has fascistic tendencies as well. I'm not saying it ticks all the boxes, but you understand that the difference is that those people might be in power, so actually have influence and actually have the capabilities of taking it all the way, where the other peoples are just people on Twitter or people in riots, for instance. Can you understand the parallels? One of them has a lot of power and accountability and may have these political leanings, and then others might just be someone who is an individual who doesn't have any power. Can you understand the difference? Doesn't it promise the peace, decrease war supply? It sure does. A lot of people in America don't even know what communism. Let's find out what is communism. What is communism? I feel like my definition is probably going to be completely wrong anyway. Let me just go down the list of things that I believe are communist. Communists' ultimate goal is to eliminate the state. Now, the problem with the state is that every communist gives a different definition of what the state actually is. I thought abolishment of the state meant pure anarchy, but apparently the state is a different definition. Lovely. The whole also idea of abolishing classes, so the idea of like the obviously monarchies, for instance, the idea of private property is abolished completely, and everything is owned either by cooperatives or state ownership, public properties. So abolishment of class, abolishment of public property, the abolishment of the state, which no one's going to agree on, the abolishment of money, which I believe that's the thing that Marx said. What's the other ones? I can't think of any others. And it also describes in... By the way, I have never actually read the Communist Manifesto. I've not read Das Kapital either. I'm just basically reeling off stuff that I've read online. So what I'm saying, by the way, might be full of shit. By the way, I always say this, and I'll say this a billion times. Never trust what a YouTuber says to you, including me, because I'm probably full of shit as well. Anyway, let's find a good long video. Let's find a long one. I don't want these short-ass 3-minute videos. Bollocks to that. Oh, Khan Academy. This is a really good impartial source.
I thought I would do a video on communism just because I've been talking about it a bunch in the history videos, and I haven't...
Yeah, so abolishment of state, abolishment of money, abolishment of class, abolishment of private enterprise, private ownership. But no private ownership, no class, no money, no state. That is the definition of communism, which I will admit that no actual communist state ever achieved. But they always say that the idea of it's like a communist transition. So like they describe the Soviet Union as a communist transitional state. Like it never reached actual communism because it was always like influenced by capitalism or something like that.
Good definition of what it means, or a good understanding of what it means. And to understand communism, let me just draw a spectrum here. So I'm going to start with capitalism.
This is a really good website, by the way, Khan Academy. Khan, is it Khan? Am I pronouncing that right? Oh, this website's so good. I learned lots of maths from this website.
And this is really just going to be an overview. People can do a whole PhD thesis on this type of thing. Capitalism, and then I'll get a little bit more, and then we could progress to socialism.
Yeah, socialism was seen as the transitional state to capitalism, where I suppose private capital is abolished. See what I mean? I don't really, from like a historical standpoint, it's hard to define these terms because these are like things that were theorized in like Marx's writings, but then never actually became in reality.
Socialism, and then we can go to communism. And the modern versions of communism are really kind of the brainchild of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. Karl Marx was a German philosopher in the 1800s who, in his Communist Manifesto and other writings, kind of created the philosophical underpinnings for communism. And Vladimir Lenin, who led the Bolshevik Revolution in and created essentially the Soviet Union, he's the first person to make some of Karl Marx's ideas more concrete. And really every nation or every country...
Yeah, that's actually one thing that surprised me as well. The Communist Manifesto isn't a book. It's an actual pamphlet. It's like a leaflet. It's the idea that it was meant to be handed out to the average Joe. It was like easy to read, which I completely disagree with. A few lines that I've read of it are incredibly complex. Like you need to get a dictionary out to like look up the definitions of certain words and whatnot. But the idea was it could be distributed in mass to a lot of people, and they could understand what communism could be, and obviously try and
which we view as communist,
injects
has really
class
followed the
consciousness.
pattern of Vladimir Lenin, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first, let's just talk about the philosophical differences between these things and how you would move. And Karl Marx himself viewed communism as kind of a progression from capitalism through socialism to communism. So what he saw in capitalism, and this, at least this
as
part
the introduction,
of what he saw was right, is that you have private property, private ownership of land. That's the main aspect of capitalism, and this is the world that most of us live in today. The problem that he saw with capitalism is he thought, well, look, when you have private property, the people who start accumulating some capital, and when we talk about capital, we could be talking about land, we could be talking about factories, we could be talking about any type of natural resources. So the people who start getting a little bit of them, so let me draw a little diagram here. So let's say someone has a little bit of capital, and that capital could be a factory or it could be land. So let me write it capital. And let's just say it's land. So let's say someone starts to own a little bit of land, and he owns more than everyone else. So then you just have a bunch of other people who don't own land, but they need to essentially, and since this guy owns all the land, they got to work on this guy's land. They have to work on this guy's land. And from Karl Marx's point of view, he said, look, you have all of these laborers who don't have as much capital. This guy has this capital, and so he can make these laborers work for a very small wage. And so any excess profits that come out from this arrangement, the owner of the capital will be able to get it, because these laborers won't be able to get their wages to go up because there's so much competition for them to work on this guy's farm or to work on this guy's land. He really didn't think too much about, well, maybe the competition could go the other way. Maybe you could have a reality eventually where you have a bunch of people with reasonable amounts of capital, and you have a bunch of laborers, and the bunch of people would compete for the laborers, and maybe the laborers could make their wages go up, and they could eventually accumulate their own capital. They could eventually start their own small businesses. So he really didn't think about.
Do you know what would be fascinating to read about? The idea of laissez-faire capitalism in France. Like in the era of Vicky 2. Because I know it was tried, the idea that capitalism was completely unregulated and just seeing how it would react on its own. And I know it was attempted in France, but obviously caused massive amounts of inequality and issues with corruption and monopolies as well.
About this reality too much over here. He just saw this reality.
Laissez-faire France. Fer-Elise. What? Am I pronouncing it wrong? Laissez-faire. How do you pronounce this?
Laissez-faire.
I said it right. I didn't do it with the French accent, though. I can't find a video on this. Maybe we'll look at it later.
To his defense, and I don't want to get in the habit of defending Karl Marx too much, to his defense, this is what was happening in the late 1800s.
He loves Karl Marx, guys.
We have the Industrial Revolution.
Exposed.
Even in the United States, you did have kind of, Mark Twain called it the Gilded Age. You have these industrialists who did accumulate huge amounts of capital. They really did have a lot of the leverage relative to the laborers. And so what Karl Marx says, well, look, if the guy with all the capital has all the leverage and this whole arrangement makes some profits, he's going to be able to keep the profits because he can keep all of these dudes' wages low. And so what's going to happen is that the guy with the capital is just going to end up with more capital. He's going to end up with more capital, and he's going to have even more leverage. And
yeah, redistribute the wealth to me, guys. Come on, where's your subs? Where's your primes?
Basic wage, so that they can never acquire capital for themselves. So, in Karl Marx's point of view, the natural progression would be for these people to start organizing. So these people maybe start organizing into unions, so they could collectively tell the person who owns the land.
Do you know what I think would be fascinating? If, let's just say, we go back in time and we assassinate Karl Marx. He's unable to write all of his work, all of his books, and he's unable to project his philosophy and his ideology on the world. what would the world look like today? Would we not have minimum wage? Would we not have the weekend? Would we not have breaks? You know what I mean? I'm just curious to see, like, for instance, it might not, we never reach socialism, we never reach communism, but we reach some influence with his work to obviously create unions and therefore create the idea of workers' rights and whatnot. So I'm just curious to see what impact on the world it would have been without his existence. I'm fascinated by that, actually.
Enter the factory. No, we're not going to work, or we're going to go on strike unless you increase our wages, or unless you give us better work.
Yeah, get this, Giga. Prior to workers' rights, the idea of a day off, there weren't any.
Working conditions. So when you start talking about this union,
7-day work week, boys, every day in those coal mines, getting whipped.
Unionization stuff, you're starting to move in the direction of socialism. The other element of moving in the direction of socialism is that Karl Marx didn't like this kind of high concentration, and this is socialists in general.
I'm almost certain that the 7-day work week was a thing, even regardless of the church. I believe that the church was like something you do in a morning on a Sunday, but then you'd go to work on a Sunday as well. Stormy. Hey, Stormy. Just undo my top button. Did that to it. Relax. Big-eyed kitty. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Stormy. What's this here, kid? What's this? Oh, Mia. The chat wants to see that cat. What are you doing? Hey? Stormy? Hey? Nope. Not interested. Hey, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Hey, boys. Hey, boys. How we feeling today, guys? We feeling good? Being nice and civil. Ooh. I think Stormy has caught a bird, or a mouse, because his tracker is covered in blood. It's definitely not his blood, though. I actually might be. Who knows? I didn't check him. F for Stormy. F for Stormy.
I should say, didn't like this high concentration of wealth. That you have this reality of not only do you have these people who could accumulate all of these wealth, and maybe to some degree they were able to accumulate it because they were innovative or they were good managers of land or whatever, although the Marxists don't give a lot of credit to the owners of capital. Not they don't really give a lot of credit to saying maybe they did have some skill in managing some type of an operation. But the other problem is that it gets handed over. It gets handed over to their offspring. So private property, you have the situation where it just goes from maybe father to son or from from parent to a child. And so it's not even based on any type of meritocracy. It's really just based on this inherited wealth. And this is a problem that, definitely happened in Europe. When you go back to the French Revolution, you have generation after generation of nobility, regardless of how incompetent each generation would be. They just had so much wealth that they were essentially in control of everything, and you had a bunch of people with no wealth having to work for them. And when you have that type of wealth disparity, it does lead to kind of revolutions. So another principle of moving in the socialist direction is kind of a redistribution of wealth. So let me write it over here. So redistribution. So in socialism, you can still have private property, but the government takes a bigger role. So you have, let me write this, larger government. And one of the roles of the government is to redistribute wealth. And the government also starts having control of kind of the major factors of production. So maybe the utilities, maybe some of the large factories that do major things, all of a sudden starts to become in the hands of the government, or in the words of communists, in the hands of the people. And the redistribution is going on. So in theory, you don't have huge amounts of wealth in the hands of a few people. And then if you kind of take these ideas to their natural conclusion.
Oh, that's actually interesting. Technocracy. Man. Tommy brings this up so often. And I think the issue with technocracy is that I think the people who are in charge are still going to be like reaching for more power. And the idea that they're intellectuals and they're smart won't deter that. Because if you look at like the Soviet Union under Stalin, he referred to his version of science and ideology as superior. And it's the same with Nazi Germany too. The book burnings, the representing of anything that isn't pure science. So this idea that under a technocracy that we're going to have a purer, better society, I don't think that would follow through. We just have a system where like science will be like purity tested under an ideology, and then we'd just end up with another power vacuum. I don't know. I don't really understand how it would work.
You get to the theoretical communist state. And the theoretical communist state is a classless.
What's that movie? Is it Divergent, where the technocrats try and take over? The name of the video is called Communism 20th Century.
Classless, and maybe even a little bit a
Communist
classless
20th Century
society.
World History.
In Karl Marx's point of view, and this is a little harder to imagine, a stateless society. I'm
interested to see how he's going to explain this, because once again, I have spoke to an anarchist, and I've also spoke to a communist, and neither of them could come to an agreement of what the definition of a state was.
So in capitalism, you definitely had classes. You had the class that owns the capital, and then you had the labor class, and you have all of these divisions, and they're different from each other. He didn't really imagine a world that maybe a laborer could get out of this. They could get their own capital. They could start their own business. So he just saw this tension would eventually lead to socialism, and eventually a classless society where you have a central. Well, he didn't even go too much into the details, but you have kind of equal. Everyone in society has ownership over everything, and society somehow figures out where things should be allocated and all of the rest, and it's all stateless. So and that's even harder to think about in a concrete fashion. So that's Karl Marx's view of things, but it never really became concrete until Vladimir Lenin shows up. And so the current version of communism that the current thing that most of us view as communism is sometimes viewed as a Marxist-Leninist state. Leninist. These are sometimes used interchangeably. Marxism is kind of the pure utopian. We're eventually going to get to a world where everyone is equal. Everyone.
Have I ever spoken to an anarcho-communist? Yes. Yes, he came on my Discord a long time ago. I made my video about anarchist Spain, and I said something in that video that wasn't quite right. I think I was referring to anarchism, and I showed lots of pictures of Karl Marx, and he commented this long paragraph in the comment section about everything I was saying was wrong. He was right. I was actually wrong. But on the level he was projecting was on a whole new level. Anyway, he came on my Discord, and I had a chat with him. and he was like, I remember the conversation was a bit strange in a way because we kept running around in circles talking about what the state was and the abolishment of the state. And I remember when I said to him, what would you define as a state? It's like, oh, the definition of a state is a contentious issue amongst communists. And I'm like, so what is the state? And he went on to this path of like, what do you think the state is? And he says, oh, if these people agree with this definition, this people agree with this definition, like, well, what's your definition? And he wouldn't really give me a full-on answer. He would not answer my question. Sad face. Mass mobilization. Mobilize everyone. I missed that by a day. Go there, and then we go back to there. Listen, I can't pronounce your name. Argyles. Dude, you think you're being really big brain, bro, but everything you've said in my chat is really, really five-head. Oh my god. The amount of five-head you're projecting in my chat right now is massive. Everyone else in the chat has been really super smart, and you just posting like really dumb brain shit. Please stop. Please stop. You're hurting me.
One is, doing exactly what they want. There's an abundance of everything. I guess to some degree, it's kind of describing what happens in Star Trek, where everyone can go to a replicator and get what they want. And if you want to paint part of the day, you can paint part of the day. And you're not just a painter. You can also do whatever you want.
So go back to watching Steven Crowder.
Let me write that down. So Marxism, pure Marxism, is kind of a utopian society. And just in case you don't know what utopian means, it's kind of a perfect society where you don't have classes, everyone is equal, everyone is leading these kind of rich, diverse, fulfilling lives. And it's also, utopian is also
oh my god, we get so many guns back.
It's kind of, if you view it in the more negative light, is like, hey, I don't know how we'll ever be able to get there. Who knows?
All right, I think I'm bored of talking about communism now.
This vanguard party that kind of creates this constant state of revolution. Some future one, and up here I'll have kind of safety nets for people. China, we do have state ownership of a lot, and you do have state control.
Wowie. All right, what can we talk about? It's different. I wanted to talk about France, laissez-faire France, but I don't think there's any videos on that.
If we have chosen the position in life in which we can most of all work for mankind, no burdens can bow us down because they are sacrifices for the benefits of all, then we shall experience no petty, limited, selfish joy, but our happiness will belong to millions. Our deeds will live on quietly but perpetually at work, and over our ashes will be shed the tears of noble people. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were philosophers, political theorists, and economists responsible for writing the
Hey, that's in Berlin. I've been there. Me and Marconi took a picture. Well, I took a picture next to Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. There was literally Chinese people queuing up to take pictures next to these statues. I kid you not. History ball. Hang on, is this guy a map dude? I feel like I recognize his name.
Jordan Peterson.
Oh god. I feel like I've seen this guy before. He used to... Oh, literally, he did make some... Oh, does he make, like, political videos now? Holy shit. Oh, no, I guess not. Maybe he does.
Jordan Peterson is a Canadian professor of psychology who, in just a few short years, managed to become a world-famous writer, lecturer, and the occasional subject of the culture wars. This video is not about him. Instead, it's about two books that he brought to fame along with him, The Gulag Archipelago and Ordinary Men. The former is a first-hand account of leftist atrocities from the perspective of their victims, while the latter is a historical investigation of rightist atrocities from the perspective of their perpetrators. So it seems to me like these two make for a natural comparison. So you can call me Ezekiel. This is the Gulag Archipelago versus...
I think I'm done with this kind of videos, guys. I think I'm done. Drew Durnall.
This Oh, you like your peanut butter, don't you, Mortimer? Oh, he's a good boy. Oh. Hey friends, did you know that climate change is definitely real and definitely affected by human action? I had to ask because, well, some people deny that that's happening. And this video's about them. Now, I'm not here to pretend that there's a real debate in science about whether CO2 affects global temperatures or whether humans have a hand in it. The science is settled and the deniers are wrong.
Oh yeah, call them deniers to make them look bad. That's a classic straw man argument. They're not denying climate change, they're just skeptical that it's happening. See, it's actually very smart when you put it that way. And look how this degenerate refuses to engage in reasonable debate with people who disagree with him. That's not rational at all. How can the issue be settled if you haven't debunked your opponent's points?
Look, mate, I hate to be dogmatic, but I think any reasonable analysis of climate deniers has to contend with the extreme deficit of actual facts on the side of people who claim to be the ones who know the facts better than the actual researchers. When someone specifically positions themselves as pro-science and fetishizes the idea of reason, the fact they're being unreasonable is something that needs to be brought up. We're gonna get into it, but if someone's evidence is so poor that even me, a gaming YouTuber who got peanut butter in his ear when he was setting up the first shot for this video, can see the holes in it, then something's really gone wrong here. So in this video, we're gonna look at some prominent climate deniers, what they have to say, why what they say is clearly wrong, why they seem to believe it anyway, how people get to be climate deniers, and what we can do to make there be less of them. Nailed it! I suppose one thing you could do is just let the ice sheets melt. I mean, the problem would kind of go away if most of them drowned. Oh, I'm dying! Oh, I guess I was wrong! Oops! We're all gonna die! Now, climate denialism doesn't come in just one flavour. No, like ogres, the issue has layers. And unlike ogres, climate deniers are not all-stars. Although the ice they skate is getting pretty thin, and the water's getting warm, so they might as well swim. Smash Mouth's All-Star was about climate change. Change my mind! Deniers range from claiming the climate isn't actually changing at all, to admitting that the climate changes but that humans don't have an effect and it's probably just normal that things have got so warm lately, I'm sure it'll go back to normal soon, to claim...
As a big Steven Crowder fan, and the biggest Steven Crowder fan, by the way, I've seen all of his albums and bought all the mugs. I am very disappointed that he didn't choose to debate that Jewish guy. I am so disappointed. I was such a massive fan, but the fact that he bailed on that Jewish guy conversation really upset me greatly. I think I might have to return all of his mugs.
Claiming that CO2 doesn't really have an effect on the climate, to saying that even if it does, it's actually good for us since plants need CO2, to saying it's real but it's not that bad and scientists are exaggerating, to saying, well, look, I'm confused. A lot of people are saying a lot of different things, so I guess it's still up for debate and we shouldn't do anything. Ah, that's great. See, even cowards have a place in denialism. If you haven't heard of Ben Shapiro, then your YouTube recommendations bar is glitched out. Shapiro is a conservative commentator who's very popular with people who already agree with him. him, and he's really good at winning debates with teenagers who haven't finished university and don't have all the media training he has. He was editor-at-large of Breitbart for 4 years, and he's written 10 books about how it's the left's fault that conservatism keeps making things worse for everyone. He's a true intellectual gymnast, the kind that can write tweets decrying when the left talk about how they're on the right side of history, and then publish an entire book called The Right Side of History. Here he is, dipping his webbed flippers into the pool of climate change with his signature Shapiro intellect.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater, right? Which, let's say all of that happens. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
It was watching this talk by Shapiro that got me wanting to look at and analyse climate denial in more detail. Because this absolute genius-brained idea that everyone affected by things like floods can just sell their homes to people who would love to buy a flooding house, apparently, and move somewhere else, well, it begs a lot of questions about how these people think. How have things reached a point where someone thinks they can get away with saying something this ridiculous in front of an audience of people, and how have things reached the point where some people in that audience won't recognise it for the obvious ignorant bullshit that it is? This led me down a particular hole of discovery. I realised that climate deniers aren't just wrong, they're obviously wrong, in very clear ways, and that makes the whole thing so much more interesting. How does this work if it's so paper thin? Take, for example, Stephen Crowder. Stephen Crowder is a conservative political commentator, and Wikipedia tells me he's a comedian, which I'm glad they mentioned or I wouldn't have noticed. Crowder's YouTube channel is his special place to wax lyrical about topical conservative issues. He's a rational thinker who doesn't play by anyone's rules and will follow truth wherever it leads. Although it always seems to lead to whatever he wanted to believe in the first place. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that he never has to change his mind about anything. Crowder has a big beef with Bill Nye, as we've seen in the past, but that's a byproduct.
I think this is an interesting point, because I've noticed that a lot of the right-wing pundits reference culture wars constantly. It's like something that gets referenced over and over again by right-wing, but I never really see this conversation about left-wing people. And if the culture war is real, and it's a real big threat, and it's going to cause the downfall of whatever kind of extreme apocalyptic scenario, surely maybe voting for the Democrats wasn't the right idea. I don't know. Maybe voting out Trump was like not the right thing to do if you wanted to destroy Western culture. I don't know, just a thought.
Of his more general climate denial.
How does it
of
go?
course,
It's going
Crowder
pretty good, my dude.
denies
Thank you for
being a
the
climate
subscription.
denier. Crowder
Jamster.
positions
Appreciate
himself
that.
as a climate realist who acknowledges that the climate has changed and is changing. It's just not changing in the way that all the scientists say it does. In other words, he's denying the science, but in denial about denying the science. His most popular video on the topic has almost 2 million views and claims to debunk the top 5 climate change myths. We'll get to his others.
Okay, I think I'm bored of this already. Oh shit, I didn't realize these videos were going to be so political. I thought they were going to be like a little bit easier. College,